Hey Shane, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. Oh, I'm liking your Johnny Cash picture.
Oh, hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
Where do we find you?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta.
And this is
Uh,
home.
yeah, this is home right now. I've been here for about 5 years now.
Nice. And where were you before that?
Well, the band, I grew up just outside Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. The band started, One Bad Son started in Saskatoon. We moved out to Vancouver for about 4 or 5 years and then came back. And then another little stint in Saskatoon and then Calgary.
So why Calgary?
I met the love of my life here. So
That's why I'm in Montreal.
Oh, is it really? Hey,
Yeah,
that's awesome, man. There's no better reason to move.
exactly. So how's life been for you recently?
Honestly, things have been okay. Yeah, things have been okay. Lots of comic book art lately
Yeah,
since there's been very little touring or no touring. Yeah, I've really been filling my time up with more and more comic art. I got a bunch on the go right now.
nice. And it's going
Yeah.
well, I heard.
Yeah, it's going really well. Going really well. I got my first series came out in the summer and was it was a hit as far as indie comics go. It was the company I work for, Mad Cave Studios. It was their biggest selling comic and broke a bunch of records. So very cool for my first time out.
Amazing. And is there any area where the comics meet the music? Is there a crossover at any point?
Uh, I'm really working on it right now. So with Shiver, with the single I have coming out, I did a little like just a very short 18-page story that goes along with the video. Because I really want to marry all my art together as much as I can, and just I figured I would start there. I mean, a lot of artists have done it very successfully. So I'm just trying to think of ways to do that for myself and for OBS as well, ways to do some more visual stuff to go along with it. So
Right. Nice.
yeah,
Well, you mentioned Shiver already,
yep.
and this is your first solo record. So my question about that is why now?
Um, I recorded the song in 2019. Actually, OBS we got a big opening spot for the Stones, and we were out in Toronto. And I just thought, you know what, I'm out here. The producer I worked with on it, Eric Ratz, who produced some One Bad Son stuff, was there. And I figured, if I'm ever going to do any solo stuff, you got to start somewhere. I had no real plans for it, but I'm like, I at least need something recorded. So I recorded the song in 2019 with plans of maybe trying to do something in 2020, which we all know how 2020 went.
Yeah.
So it went back on the shelf for another year or so. And I just figured now was a good time, and doing something on my own was a good way to sort of kind of get back into it, since comic books really sort of took up all my time. And this was a really nice way to get back into doing music and just sort of getting the whole thing going again. Kurt and I are doing a lot of One Bad Son stuff now too. So it's just kind of got the ball rolling on music again for me. And
Cool.
also just thought, like, I mean, you got to put a song out sometime. I'm human, and you're like, I should probably finally stop being scared and not put this thing out. So let's put it out and get the video out and that. So I just figured
So,
now's a good time for it.
so was this the first song that you wrote knowing that it wasn't going to be for One Bad Son?
No, not at all. Actually, I mean, I kind of just write. I never really write thinking like this is going to be OBS or this is going to be my thing. I tend to you get inspired by something, you start writing, and then afterwards you think, oh, this would be really cool for the band. Or there was one song in particular called The Outlaw Josie Wales, which was on the Black Buffalo record,
Right.
which was really, I wrote it and thought, oh man, this would be cool to save for a solo thing at some point down the road. And I played it for the band just to, we're throwing ideas around, and they loved it and thought, hey, that's a very cool, different song to have on the record. So that's example of a song that I really thought would be just for me and turned out to be a great song for the band. So yeah, I have a big catalog of songs that never made the cut for OBS. So I
Yeah.
mean, it just goes that way when you're trying to select songs, and we write so much, and I write so much myself that yeah, never at a loss for things to put out, just trying to find the best ones.
Do you have like a plan to release more solo stuff moving forward and even do like solo shows?
Definitely want to do some shows. Yeah, I'm kind of looking at that right now. Probably not too much this year, like in Alberta, especially. I mean, COVID, the fourth wave, has been brutal in this province, and we won't get too deep into that. But let's just say it hasn't been good. So I just want to make sure things are safe and going forward with, I don't want to plan a show and have it go any kind of bad way, but I might do just a couple, smaller shows. And the point of my solo stuff was always to do more intimate stuff anyways. So as long as it's seated and we can do it safe and fully vaccinated and all that, I'll be just fine with it. But I think the point of putting the song out was kind of just to get it out, see what people think of some of my solo stuff, and definitely want to record more in the future as I'm able to do it. So yeah, I'm hoping it's a start. I always wanted to do something solo kind of outside the band so that when we're not on tour, I can still have some music in my life and not have to make it my prime thing, like going out and really working radio and all those things. Kind of nice to have a passion project that you can just write, play some shows and let it grow on its own, as opposed to the big machine that, the band. I love the band. Rock and roll is that's my life, but it's a machine once you start getting into the records and all the, all the things that come along with that. So
yeah. So you mentioned rock and roll is your life. What was the first music you remember listening to as a kid?
Well, it's funny. I mean, I grew up on the farm in rural Saskatchewan by a little town called Broadacres. So we had nothing but AM radio, and it was, my first experiences were Beatles songs on the bus. Actually, one Beatles song over and over and over again. It's not the greatest way to expose the kid to any kind of music.
Right. What song was that?
Actually, it was there was a lot of Yellow Submarine, which for the longest time I was like, is this the Beatles? And then of course, as you realized, a much larger catalog than just like the one or two songs you heard on the bus growing up.
Yeah.
But no, honestly, I got into rock and stuff early. Like my, being a rural kid, there was no exposure to much besides what, my brothers would bring home on tapes and CDs and that sort of thing. But the first music that really spoke to me when I kind of hit like 13, 14 years old was when I really got into, like, I heard Alice in Chains for the first time and Soundgarden. I mean, my oldest brother listened to a lot of metal. Like, so I already was pretty big on Metallica and Megadeth, bands like that. But once I heard all those Seattle bands, that really was like, okay, that hit me in a place I hadn't been hit before with music in a big way. So, and I would say especially out of that scene, I mean, I love Nirvana and Pearl Jam and stuff, but I think Alice in Chains and Soundgarden were like huge. The voices like Staley and Cornell just blew my mind. And, I wasn't playing music or anything at that time, but I just began to totally idolize those guys.
Right. So is that the kind of music that reminds you of like your high school years, I guess?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That was the music of my formative years for sure. So it was a lot of that all the time. And then of course, as you do, you kind of start getting their influences. I mean, I think every band's been influenced by Zeppelin to some point, like every rock band, right? And it seems like every generation has taken a piece of Zeppelin with it, and exposed that side of it, but no one's really put it all together in the way they could. But yeah, so I started getting into Zeppelin and discovering things like even Bowie, and I credit Kurt, my good friend and drummer for One Bad Son. He's a huge music guy. So once the band started up, he started to expose me to a lot of those things, like he's a big Captain Beefheart fan and stuff like that. So so my coming from a small place, I mean, and this is pre Spotify and all that, right? So you're very limited to the kind of things you could get exposed to unless somebody, you're at a party. I remember when I first discovered the Tragically Hip, I was at a house party when I was like 16 and somebody's playing, it's a small town Sask, so it's a lot of hip. And I'm like, oh, who are these guys? That's how you get exposed to stuff, is I'm sure it's kind of the same way now. You just have so much in front of you that, you know, then it was just like, wow, like somebody was playing a song in their car, and then you learned, you know, who maybe one of your favorite bands was. So
yeah. And are you the kind of person that keeps up with music as much as you can now? Are you keeping up with like current music?
you know, here and there, honestly. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's funny. I mean, I'm 41 now, and I can see how naturally, unless you really try to, you can very naturally sort of stick with what you love. It's kind of your comfort zone. And so I will admit that I don't go out and really like look for new stuff. And I'll also admit that, you know, what I just said happens a lot less now, where you're at somebody's place and they're playing something you haven't heard. Like, I don't know, everyone's got their own specific playlists, and there's so much music out that it's kind of funny. It's like it's the paradox of choice, right? When you only have a few things, you tend to kind of look at all of them. But when you have all of this stuff out, and there's never been a time in music where it was easier to be exposed to the public, but it's so saturated that it's sometimes hard to weed through and find things you might like, you know?
Absolutely. And I also think that, especially if you have that fear of missing out, you might find something that you like, but there's so much more coming out constantly that you almost don't give that the time it deserves. And some albums just take a little bit of running in. Like some of my favorite albums weren't my favorite albums on the first listen, but they got
absolutely
over time, and vice versa, you know?
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And I think, you know, I always want to be careful that I'm not, you know, like the way music is now, I mean, it's great for artists. When One Bad Son started in 2004, I wish we had the kind of, you know, that you could go and get something on iTunes and Spotify and start getting people to hear it like right off the bat. That would have been really nice. So I'm not saying it's one of these things, like I wouldn't say things were better back in the day than they are now, you know, even for discovering music. Cause I think, you know, the kids that are 15 now, like I was, they just have a whole new way that they get exposed to new music. Right. That is absolutely the norm for them. And for us, like you're saying, that was a thing. You'd get a record, especially if you paid $25 for like whatever, the new Van Halen record, and you get it home and you're like, I don't know about this, but maybe on the fifth listen through, because you invested cash into it and you're going to give it the time. And then you might actually see like, oh, okay, like I get where they're going with this. You know, and you can start to warm up to it and really get a lot out of it. And I think that's the one thing I would say that is definitely tough nowadays, because you have a tendency to be like, oh, I listened to, like, I heard the new GNR track that they just dropped, and I thought, it's okay. And then I haven't listened to it again. Whereas had I bought that song and even put $10 into it, I might think, wow, I'll give it a go for a few days. And
well, that Guns N' Roses song that just came out, it's 13 years old.
Yeah.
But
right.
It's just been sitting around. And I guess with a band like that, they just want to keep constantly giving you something to keep them in your consciousness.
Yeah.
And I think you know, they've released a couple of songs recently, but they're really old songs. I think they're from the Use Your Illusion recording. Something like that.
Yeah. And I think even maybe from the Chinese Democracy era, which, you know, so it's and I think there's that tendency of like wanting we live in the era of content, right? And TikTok and all those things, which again, they're great. There's a lot of people doing great things with that. But I think unless you have something, this isn't a direct shot against GNR, by the way, but I think unless you've got something you really want to put out, why put it out? Like if you have a song that you're like, like we could do better, there's really no point, because what is that going to do for people? They're not gonna, it's not gonna wait. If they're not already fans, is it going to turn them into fans? And if it's not as good as anything you've put out before, your fans aren't really going to care, you know? So I still think that no matter what you do, you want to make sure the quality is there. I mean, quantity, I mean, I'm always a quality over quantity kind of person when it comes to art of any kind, you know?
Yeah. So with this song coming out, like you obviously had a lot of success with the band. How do you feel? Do you feel nervous about putting out your own stuff? Are you excited about putting your own stuff? It's basically you know, taking it all on your own shoulders and putting it out in front of the world and saying, what do you think of this?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that question because yeah, it's far more nerve-wracking. I'm not going to say I'm nervous, like, because I feel like when you have something that you think is, I love the song, I love how it turned out, I'm really happy with it, and it's art, right? You make a painting and you hang it on a wall, and that now it's not yours anymore, right? You're like, and if 3 people walk up and say this is garbage, well, that's the way that's their deal. If you did your best job and you love it, and that's what art is. But there's no doubt that it's more nerve-wracking on your own than with the band. And I've joked with my wife about this a lot, where if you fail as a band, you've got, in our case, 4 other people that you can share that misery with. And you can sort of, it's like losing, the World Series. You've got a whole team of people that can be sad with you. But if it's your own thing, you just have that extra sort of, this all came out of my head. This is my playing. It just naturally comes with a little bit extra nervousness, but I'm very excited about it. Honestly, I also I love the challenge of doing something new. And I've always, I'm not a natural collaborator, and I think a lot of artists are like that, but I'll say that the best things I've written have been with a group. It's when you have too much coming out of your own head and no one else's influence, things can get stale. And I think I've really grown to love working in the band and writing with other people, but it has been cool because that can also be tough to keep having your ideas do this.
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit freeing to just, and I wouldn't want to write this way all the time, but it was cool to just say, hey, I got this idea. This is how I think it should sound. Get it out. And I really look forward to being able to do both, because I think it's creatively really good to go from writing on your own and having it all in your hands to then letting go again and writing with a group and having that whole dynamic. I think they can both really help each other. So
yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier about opening for the Stones, which that's like, dream material for anybody starting out in music, right? And I know you've opened for people like Def Leppard and big names. So you've had a lot of success, and you've obviously had chart hits and all that kind of stuff. What is success for you as a solo artist?
I think just the ability to continue to do it, honestly. It's when you start to commercialize your art in any way. I mean, I'm discovering the same things with my comic art. It really doesn't matter what it is. If you're doing it at home and no one's seeing it or hearing it, well, then it's fun. As soon as you put it out into the world, there's a whole other thing out there. And I feel like, especially with the band, because we've had commercial success and we've got a really good following, you naturally get this pressure with every new thing to be at least as good as the last thing, if not more. And it's really like, it drives you to make great music in some ways, but it can also really start to wear you down, like the grind of the industry and the touring and trying to, like, well, we put a song out, but then, this other band just put a song out, and you're head to head with even bands that you love. And it can be a little draining. And honestly, for my solo stuff, the idea was just to write music that, spoke to me, put it out, not really worrying about who it's going to land with, right? Just, for once in such a long time, just to kind of put music out and just let people digest it, and not really go overboard with advertising it and pushing it and trying to get radio and trying to get all of those things that can be, they really can be soul draining. I mean, I've got good friends that have quit music because they love writing and love playing. They can't stand the industry, and it can really suck a lot of creativity out of you. So yeah, I think success with my solo work is just that I get to keep doing it and keep putting it out. And if it does connect with anybody, amazing. And I'll go play for those people, whether it's 5 people or 500. I'm looking forward to that. Just sort of just letting go a little bit more. And if I'm able to keep doing it, that would absolutely be success for me.
Yeah. So in your 41 years on planet Earth, what do you think is the album you've listened to the most?
Oh man, that's a great question. That's a great question. Honestly, I would say, if I were to be honest with myself and really kind of look back at something that has always just been around, you know, I think Down on the Upside, Soundgarden, has probably just been, it's either been a CD in my player that became so scratched that it didn't work anymore. You know, it's always on a playlist. Like if you're asking for an album, yeah, I've probably listened to that thing a million times. Like, you know, and it's kind of funny when you ask that question, it's not really conscious, right? It's like some of these albums that hit you as a kid, they just, you know, yeah, they just kind of stick with you. When I first got into vinyl and stuff, I got a whole slew of Rolling Stones records too. So those definitely went up on my on the amount of spins that they got in my house. But yeah, some of that, especially that era of Soundgarden, that was my stuff. So yeah, that's probably the record.
And do you still have that Soundgarden album? Do you have it on vinyl?
I don't have it on vinyl, actually. That's probably something I should get. So if anybody's looking to buy me a Christmas present this year, hey, send it over.
Yeah. So is there one track in any point in history that you really wish that you'd written?
Oh man, I love that question because there's a million of them, you know.
What springs to mind?
Oh, a track that I really wish I wrote. These are great questions, by the way. I love it. It's well, it makes you think, right? Because there's songs I definitely love. Well, okay, this maybe it's hard to think. Your brain starts going through like the million songs, right? Yeah. You know, one song that I get a little hung up on sometimes is Paint It Black by the Stones, because you spend so much time when you write music trying to, you know, first you write, you get your parts, you get ideas, melodies, this and that, and then you try to arrange it, right? And there's something about that song, it just goes back and forth. It's just like there's no real verse, there's no real chorus. It's just it's two parts, they really just go back and forth, back and forth. And for some reason that song could be 30 minutes long and I don't think I'd ever get tired of it. And I mean, I would die to write a song like that. It's so simple and it's so dark and light. It's just like, it just keeps flipping from dark to light and you never get tired of it. I mean, I wish I could write a song like that, or even close to something that's it's just so simple, you know, and the lyrics are so simple, but so vivid. You know, so right off the top of my head, for sure.
You could probably say the same about Sympathy for the Devil as well. Like, it just kind of keeps going and there isn't really a chorus, and it's got that dark and light shade to it as well. I think that's something the Stones do well anyway.
Absolutely. And I often wonder if it's like, you know, a lot of bands, you ask them, how do you come up with this? And they just write the way they write. And I wonder if there's ever a conversation about like, there's no real chorus in Sympathy for the Devil. You're right. And did a producer or somebody be like, hey, fellas, like, you know, this is kind of just a part that keeps going and we should maybe throw something out. Like, I wonder how, you know, I do really wonder about what conversations in those studios were like, you know, especially with some of their big hits. Did they, how much pushback, or how much were they like, that's the way we do it? And that's because it is a very different thing. And now, especially since music's gone, there's so much commercial side of it. And we've been exposed to this writing with bigger producers of like, well, you kind of need this in a song and you need this, like you need like the Dave Grohl thing is like chorus on chorus on chorus. And of course that works. And they've got massive hits, but I'm always interested in like, some of my favorite songs aren't like that at all. There's just a hook. There's some sort of hook that keeps you coming back. I think it's something that like hip hop has always done real good, and rap, like some of my favorite rap songs. I mean, it's just that it's a hook and that's it. And that song could be 50 minutes long and you're into it. And I think, you know, sometimes rock can get a little too formulaic as opposed to just like sticking with a simple idea and rolling with it. So
yeah. Okay, so you brought up hip hop and rap music. It doesn't have to be in that genre, but what's an album that you love that people would be surprised that you love?
Oh man, They probably wouldn't be a huge surprise, but I think when I got, because I've always been such a rock and roll fanatic, but when I got Johnny Cash at Folsom Prison, that was also one of the very first vinyl I got. I got a kind of a little turntable, and I started getting some vinyl, and I found a bunch. As you do, this was before vinyl kind of blew up again, so there was a lot of cheap records out there.
Right.
And I picked that up, not for any real reason. It was just in a stack that I bought, and I listened to that record a lot. I love the fact that, Cash's voice on that recording, because it is live. I mean, they didn't record it and then come back to the studio and plug in some cleaner vocals. Like, you can hear his voice break up, and you can hear him get pitchy, and you can hear him. He's got so much. You can tell when a singer is excited, because it is not pretty all the time. You can really hear his voice crack up, and the fact that he's excited, he might even be tired. Like, I just love the rawness of that record, and how raw, even for the 60s, they left it sounding really the way I would imagine the way they recorded it. And that record really exposed me to, when I went down the rabbit hole of, Waylon Jennings and getting into more outlaw country and that sort of thing. So I don't know that people would be shocked, because now they know that obviously I'm a huge Johnny Cash fan, but at the time I wasn't. I mean, when you're 21 years old, you don't get it. When all you're listening to is AIC and Soundgarden and that sort of stuff, you don't really get it. But once you hear that and start to really hear it, that's albums like that, I think, can be life-changing, because they're just so iconic.
Just touching briefly on One Bad Son, what's the song that you're proudest of from that whole catalog? It doesn't have to be the most popular or the most successful, just one song that you're really proud of.
I'm really proud of, well, it's funny because it's our number one, our only number one we got in Canada, but not for the fact of what it did, but Raging Bull, the way it came together, really felt like we have the history of that band is just so kind of strange. Like, we weren't friends beforehand. Like, we all met, it's not like we were friends in high school and got this band. And so we were very much different people coming into this group with very different ideas. And over the course of, we had 2 independent records, and then that last record, Made in the Name, was our third that was like on a label and all that. The cool thing with that song is, through all of that time, there was really a sense of trying to figure out who we were and trying different things, and, really kind of finally zeroing in on what our band was. And I really feel like, to be honest, there's so many tunes we could talk about how they came together, and there's so many OBS songs I absolutely love, but the way Raging Bull came together really felt like a moment of the band kind of finally being like in this moment of, it just really felt good and real, and kind of, which this is very rare in songwriting, it felt very easy.
Right.
And we really kind of hit this, we were on the same page with that track so much, I think. And it just has a special place in my heart, because it was the kind of song that, this also rarely happens, where you really felt like it was special. There's a million songs that you write and you record and you fall in love, they're your babies, and you think, I don't know, you put this out, who knows what people are going to think of this. But I think when we especially pushed Raging Bull up the hill, which is always a thing with songwriting, to try to get it to where it's done, and just felt like, wow, that really feels special. And that's before we released it and before it did anything. You just had this feeling that, that song it had something special, and it really captured all those years of writing up to that song, I felt.
Do you ever get that feeling of chasing that when you're in the studio writing new music together?
Yeah. I think, it's obviously COVID hit and we hadn't really written together and stuff. And I felt that after we did that song and it hit number one, this happened before with any of the top tens we had, where you now like, wow, look at the success. Like what comes along with getting that kind of success is like Rolling Stones shows and all these things. And you start to, really think like we need to recapture some of that magic. And with Raging Bull especially, yeah, it's a great question once again, where you kind of feel like, I want that feeling again. Yeah. And you, now you have other great ideas and you're trying to put them together, and you're maybe trying to artificially manufacture something that was just lightning in a bottle. And man, what a thing. It's really a head trip, because you can't, when things are happening and it's right and it's easy, it's just, you're not really in your head about it. It's just, it's coming out of you. But man, if you're trying to chase that thing, you can definitely feel you're not only pushing a rock up a hill, you've got somebody is strapping weights onto you as you go.
Yeah. And that's not the most creative state of mind, right?
No, not at all. And, you know, again, talking about Shiver, that was kind of the thing with that song. I mean, that's really the message of that song is rediscovering a connection to music that has nothing to do with what will this song do for us? What, is this going to be as good as the last one? I mean, you can't, you really can't recreate magic. That's why it's magic, right? So each new song needs a bit of a fresh approach and a bit of a, this isn't that song. So it's very difficult to do as an artist to try to keep your head in check and take a deep breath and just write and try to let the art flow through you, as opposed to, you know, as that industry starts to seep into your brain, it can really poison a lot of great ideas.
Yeah. Well, I think with Shiver, you've kind of been able to remove a lot of those elements and just kind of focus on what you want to do personally. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I love the song. It's a really, really great song. So I'm excited to see what you do after that. So what are you going to do after that? Do you have plans moving forward?
Yeah, I think, you know, again, just that song had been sitting on a shelf now for such a long time. And I think with COVID, I mean, it's coming to an end in a very slow, very difficult way. Yeah, exactly. Fingers crossed. But I just felt like definitely if COVID hadn't hit, I probably would have had more songs recorded and did a little bit more of a planned EP. But it just felt like, man, whatever. It was kind of a feeling of like, whatever, like, let's get it out, see how people like it. Definitely going to be recording more stuff. But what that stuff is going to be is, you know, I have songs that don't sound like Shiver, and, you know, I have stuff that, so it's kind of, I think I'm just going to, it's a bit of a wait and see approach, see how people kind of respond to the song, and then see about playing some live stuff and trying out some of my other solo songs on people. And because that's always been a thing. OBS always did that too, which is like trying new songs out on people before you record them, just to sort of see what feels right. So there'll definitely be some more stuff. Absolutely. As far as like a strict timeline, I don't really have much, especially now that I'm juggling like 2.5 careers. It's a matter of like really trying to find balance and have a personal life on top of it. Right. So.
Yeah, but that sounds like an exciting place to be in life, right?
You know, I mean, my motto for the last few years has been more art all the time. So, and it's kind of been the idea behind that being whatever that means. So if comic books hit hard and I have a space of time where, man, I got to focus on that and put my head down and do it, I'll do it. When the solo stuff comes up, same thing. And when the band is back in full swing, then I'm doing that. Like, just instead of trying to be so conscious of like, okay, it's this much time for this much time for this, just sort of letting that art happen, let the inspiration happen, and then do it as you can do it.
Excellent.
Without, you know, getting the odd hour of sleep at night, you know, is always helpful.
Okay, well, congratulations on doing something that is hopefully going to be well received, and I really love it, like I say. So
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing what you do with this new chapter of your journey. But and hopefully we'll see you in a live venue somewhere soon as well.
Awesome. Well, you definitely will. It'll definitely happen at some point here. Absolutely. So
great, man. Well, it's been really nice talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much. And again, great question. I'd like to tell people, because in the band, one last thing, we've done so many terrible like radio interviews, and like, you're just being asked the most standard questions that like, I really appreciate when somebody has done some homework and asked like really thoughtful questions. So thank you so much for that.
Okay. What's the one question you never want to hear again?
Oh my God. What's the band name? What's your craziest road story? With One Bad Son, it was always, who's the bad son? Like, don't ask a band how they got their band name, because here's the answer for every band. We came up with it one day and it stuck.
Yeah.
99% of the time.
You can't change it.
Oh yeah, and you're like, I mean, that's what happened with us. We had this name, we played a show. All of a sudden, 10 years later, that's who you are. You're like, I don't know. Didn't really think about it. So
all right. Well, thanks again. I really enjoyed our talk, and have a great weekend. And
yes, you too. Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Cheers.
All right then. Thanks, Shane.